All right, we're live with another episode of the Acetlinx adventure. I'm your host Fozan, and today we're going to be talking about one of probably my most favorite class I've ever took. I mean, I'm still in high school, obviously, right? I still got a couple classes left, but I am rest assured that this is probably one of the best classes I ever took, and that was AP Computer Science A. Right, I recommend a lot of people to take it if they're interested in potentially pursuing or getting a glimpse of the um, the STEM world with regards to programming and algorithms. So, how I even got into the class was just alone like a very interesting story. So in ninth grade, right, uh, I decided that I wanted to fix my schedule basically, and I wanted to remove one class, and then I wanted to put Introduction to Computer Science, which was a course offered at our school for introductory, it's an introductory programming class. They just cover the very minimum basics of Java. So it was an honors class, and I wanted to put that into my schedule for my 10th grade schedule while I was in ninth grade. So I emailed the head of guidance at the time. The reason why I didn't contact my own guidance counselor was because she was on a maternity leave. So I thought the best option would go to the head of guidance. And he said, well, the class that I wanted to remove, he said that it's very hard to put Introduction to Computer Science in. But then he found out that AP Computer Science A was open, and it would work perfectly with my schedule because he would just simply take that class out and then put that class in because they happened at the same time. So I was like, all right, I'll think about it, because at the time I was kind of scared of AP classes, right? I've only taken one, which was world history, and that was hard on its own. But I said I'll think about it, right? Because in AP class, it requires a different type of rigor. So I went home, I talked to my dad about it, and he said, pursue it. It's a good class. He said computer science is a good field, right? You're gonna learn a lot in that class. So I email him back. He puts it in the schedule, and boom, I was in AP Computer Science A, which was kind of weird too to a lot of students because AP Computer Science A at the time wasn't even offered to 10th graders. They were offered to only juniors and seniors. So it was very interesting that I put in AP Computer Science A. But the only reason why he did that was because I had some type of programming background, which is very different from maybe your different prospects. There's different types of students that actually enter usually computer science classes, right? There's usually three types of students, right? One is the one that wants to learn to program, right? So they enter the computer science class saying, "Hey, I want to learn to program," and then they sort of develop a passion, or like they get a sort of a touch of that field, right? You also get like people that want to sort of have a rigorous schedule, right? They want to take an AP class, so they look at AP Computer Science A as an opportunity. So they would utilize that to sort of boost their GPA, boost their rank, or apply. It would be good for colleges. And then you also got the third type of people that were like very into programming. They wanted that programming background. They have that programming background, and they want to sort of expand that with an AP class at their school. So they're developing their passion not only at home, but they're also developing it at their school, where they can get credits for their high school and potentially college credit if they pass the AP exam. So that was a story that sort of got me into the class. And after that, I had to look at the summer assignment, because for AP classes, or if not most, if not all, I don't think all AP classes have it. I think most AP classes have a summer assignment. And my summer assignment was basically 8 problems, and you have to program, you have to sort of debug, and you have to sort of follow loops. And this was sort of my first glimpse of, well, the introduction to AP computer science. Sorry, an introduction to sort of the computer science realm in our school, because I hadn't taken Intro to Computer Science honors. Now, the teacher that was teaching AP Computer Science A at that time recommended to take Introduction to Computer Science honors because she thought it would be a good introduction. It basically gives them more time, right? Which a lot of teachers that are specifically tailored to the AP exam might find. Like, there's a lot of content to cover in a limited amount of time. So by taking intro as a prerequisite, you basically got the concepts, the basic fundamentals down, right? And then you just have to learn the concepts in AP Computer Science A, which I initially wanted to do, but since I was offered Computer Science A just directly, then I just took that opportunity. So the summer assignment was basically just a summary of that Introduction to Computer Science honors class, and I felt like my only issue was with the summer assignment was that it was in Java, and then I later found out that the entire AP exam was actually done in Java. Now, my expertise in programming at the time was simply JavaScript that I learned from Khan Academy. Khan Academy had these like JavaScript courses that, for web development or simply drawing. I like to like draw when I was in, I believe, 6th grade, I think, with the JavaScript. It was very fun. But that's how I learned sort of the rudiments of computer science, right? Variables, arrays, stuff like that, all the basic stuff, right? And then Python, I sort of experimented with Python simply because I wanted to create an application with it. It was interesting. I liked it. I think I'm actually getting into it more recently now because of its utilization in artificial intelligence, but that's like another story. But just know that at the time I was doing it, I was simply doing JavaScript and Python, but I had to now adapt to a new programming language called Java, which is an object-oriented programming language. So the summer assignment, I was chilling, right? I got it done. It was, I think, one of the hardest problem on that summer assignment was creating a GPA calculator. And it wasn't hard for the reason that you think. It wasn't hard, like, conceptually to actually create it. It just, I think, the thing is that I made, like, 5 different instances. So, like, it would run one by one, right? Without, like, let's say you have, like, 8 classes, right? What I would do in my GPA calculator was that it would calculate every gate separately. When instead, what you could do, what I learned after the AP class, was that you could have just looped it so that it would have calculated the GPA with one simple program. So my program came out to be pretty long. It had like not hundreds, I don't think it was hundreds of lines of code, but it was a pretty long program when I could simplify that by like 1/8 of the amount of space by simply just making it into a loop. So that was just one, not issue, but sort of hurdle of the summer assignment that I later not recovered from, but later learned about in my class. So what happened was that the teacher that put the summer assignment up for me, right, or for my AP Comp Sci class, because we were taking it the second semester. AP Comp Sci was the second semester. Introduction to Computer Science was in the first semester. So with regards to AP Computer Science A, by the time that second semester rolled around, the teacher had actually left the school. So we were left with, technically speaking, no AP Computer Science teacher, but the district had other plans. So I don't think they found a replacement, but what they did put was 2 teachers. And I'll get to them later, probably towards the end, but they put the district supervisor for technology, right? He used to teach AP Computer Science, years back at the same school, right? But he got promoted, obviously, to the Board of Education building. And then I had another math teacher that had some background in computer science, but she was going to learn from the district supervisor how to conduct the class. So she was there to sort of be our teacher when he wasn't there, because his main job is being the district supervisor of technology supervisor of our school district, right? So he couldn't be in our class all the time, and in that case, she would be our teacher. So she was our main teacher, right? But who taught the person that taught us the content was the district supervisor, because he had that experience with computer science and teaching people to get that or to pass the exam. So he was a very good guy. I'll discuss them a little bit later, because I feel like the more integral part of the podcast should be about like the actual class itself. So the first day I rolls in, and I think the first thing we did was set up a lot of stuff. So we set up a Google Classroom, we set up Albert.io, which I'll discuss later, and we set up this thing called MindTap. Now the textbook that we used was the Java Programming 8th edition textbook. I think it was the 8th edition, but it had Java Programming as, the textbook. So it wasn't really an AP, like, it wasn't like a prep book that specifically said AP edition, right? It was a Java Programming textbook that you would learn the Java Programming language. And what came with the textbook was, it was an online textbook, and what came with it was a program called MindTap. And what we would do on MindTap is we would do our programming assignments on there. Not necessarily like programming projects, but programming like programming exercises. That's the right word. Programming exercise. So it'd be like, make a loop for this type of scenario, and then we would make a loop of that program and then create an instantiation of class to sort of test out that loop. So we would do our tests, we would do our textbook on it was on there, we'd do our tests on there, and we would do our practice on there to grind out the concepts. Google Classroom was meant so that we could submit our projects, and the funniest part was to extend the time for the project, or possibly push the test to another day. But that was mainly there simply for us to communicate with the teacher. Well, we also could have communicated with him on Twitter. He was cool with that. But Google Classroom was the best option because when he wasn't there, right, we can communicate with him and he'll get a notification on his phone. So the projects, how assignments would work would be, we didn't necessarily get like a homework that was like a minor assignment. So in my schools, major assessments such as tests and projects are 75% of your grade. This is specifically for AP classes, by the way. Honors and regular classes, they're completely different scale. So 75% will be your major assignments such as tests and projects, and then 25% would be your accumulation of minor assignments such as homework, classwork, and I'm forgetting one more thing, quizzes. So what he would do is that he would assign us a project for homework, and we would have like a week to complete it, and it would be like a combination of all the concepts that we learn in the chapter. So every chapter there would be two major assignments. One would be the actual test, and then it will be the programming project. And in these programming projects, it was just a bunch of scenarios, and they would tell us to make a program. So it's like someone's ordering you. It's like almost like you're working for a company, and you're asked to make a program for if not their IT, for maybe their accounting department, or maybe for their restaurant, right? I remember one example was like, try to make a sandwich with the Java programming languages and then calculate the price. So we were basically, making a mini cash register almost with the Java programming languages. And that was our assignment for the week, and we would grind that out, and then we would submit it to him through Google Classroom. And then we would have like the programming exercise to work in, class. And I think, and then the final thing that we had was Albert.io. Now, this specifically was the most annoying aspect of the AP Computer Science A when I was taking it. Because of just how like crazy like the questions were. I've noticed this for other classes as well. Albert.io specializes in making questions that are harder than the actual AP exam. And by making questions that are harder than the actual AP exam, students that, try to grind them, conceptually understand those problems with regards to like the concepts that they learn in class and then try to apply them, they're going to be better prepared for the AP exam, because when they take the AP exam, it's simply going to be easier. However, what a lot of people don't account for, I'm guessing they probably do account for this, but like, do the ends justify the odds? One thing is that it's so frustrating when you get like a bunch of problems wrong in a row, right? And it's not that like, you don't understand the problem. It's just that there's always some aspect to it that is not necessarily difficult, but you have to be almost like perfect with it. So Albert.io would give us this like long segments of code, like these long segments of code, and to understand it, it would take a good 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a bit much. The thing is that there would be so many lines of code, and you have to account for it, because think about it, right? What do computers do? They follow an algorithm, right? So they follow a set. They get instructions from the high level language such as Java, right, and they convert it to machine language, and then they execute that machine language in the order that it's given, because well they pursue algorithmic processing. They pursue algorithms because that's how they do. But they're so perfect at it because they're so perfect at it because that is how they execute their programs. That's what they're ultimately programmed for. Whereas a human, right, we can simply just be asked in a very abstract way, hey, go to the bus stop, for example, right? I'll go to the bus stop because I know what they're talking about, right? But if you tell like a computer to do that, they're not going to know. You have to give them set key of instructions. So now when the tables are turned, right, now when I have to sort of analyze the algorithms, it's tough because you have to account for everything. You can't just miss a line of code while you're going through a loop, while you're doing a recursive problem. And Albert.io stresses that a lot because when you do these problems over and over again, eventually your mind becomes so sharp when doing algorithms, when you're doing or analyzing programs, that you'll recognize flaws. You'll recognize when, hey, something doesn't work. That alone, I think, it just makes it frustrating because you get like, when you get a problem wrong on Albert.io, it's like so blatant. It's like, everything's right, and then they try to correct you and everything when you felt like you got the correct answer. But you also have to realize that Albert.io is not meant to be a representation of the AP exam. It's meant to be a harder version of the AP exam, so that when you take the AP exam, it's a breeze. So that was just a frustrating aspect of it, but I also have to sort of dedicate a lot of my, like, I guess I have to dedicate some form, well, I guess I dedicate my sort of expertise or, well, easiness through the AP exam that I went through to Albert.io. The AP exam wasn't that bad because I went through worse. Albert.io. Again, it's frustrating, but I felt like it worked out at the end. Now, class material is a bit of a mix because I can't just say this was easy, this was hard, this was easy. Because again, that's subjective, and at the same time, teachers teach it differently. And again, what my teacher did, he was very smart about it. He recognized that you can't just teach like programming like you teach like another math class, right? I mean, you can, and some teachers can pull it off, right? But some can't. And the reason for that is because programming is so different. There's a reason why they have like Algebra 2 as a prerequisite, right? And instead of like, pre-algebra, right? They want you to have at least some basic mathematics down so that when you take when you take AP Comp Sci, then it's much more easier to understand the sort of the numerical aspect of it and the algorithmic aspect of it. So the first part of it was the basics of a computer. Now, this is just straightforward. I think we covered this in the first day pretty easily. And it's just basically talking about like how Java is a high-level language, how computers really mainly only understand machine language, and then like compilers, they convert high-level languages to machine languages. And then we learn the different parts of a computer, such as the CPU, ALU, stuff like that. That was pretty simple. I think anyone could get that. It's more of like, just to cover it because you covered it in an actual like comp sci class in school. I don't think there was a question on this on the AP exam. It might have been one question. I do not recall. I know that one question that they did do, which caught me by surprise, actually was like binary to octal, like the different numerical systems. Those it's not a lot of people sort of skip through it. I think we covered it only in like one day, but it was on the AP exam and it was only one question. So if you want to get like a freebie question, make sure to cover that maybe briefly so that you don't stumble upon it. I was kind of just surprised because I didn't really cover that in my practice prior to taking the AP exam, but it was there. So numerical systems is an aspect that you have to remember. The basics of Java was basically an intro to computer science. It was basically the summer assignment. All the concepts that we learned in the summer assignment, you cover in the basics chapter. So in Java basics, you learn about variables, you learn about comments, you learn about operators, escape sequences, input, output. Input and output is not necessarily tested on the AP exam. But I think it's so important to all your other future projects that they cover it even in this class. On the AP exam, it's like integer x is equal to, and then in a comment, insert algorithm to collect data, collect input from the user. But when you're doing future projects, you're not going to just simply, put that there, right? You have to get a user input because, you need to operate it. That's how you get that interaction between the user. So we learn input and output utilizing the scanner class. And I think casting. So all in all, Java basis was pretty easy. It's intro to comp sci. That's what you cover in introduction to comp sci, so that when you get into, I think there's other stuff that introduction to comp sci covers, right? I think the next 2 units they actually cover, and then it's on to AP comp sci. Then we cover expressions, operators, and control structures, and this is seriously just mathematics, right? But it's a very weird form of mathematics because the way that you write it out, right? Instead of writing less than, the way that you write less than or equal to on your piece of paper in a math class is very different from, well, not very different, but it's different from how you would put that in a compiler. And not equal to is not just an equal sign with a slash on it. It is actually exclamation point equal to. So these are just mini things you gotta learn, and I think it comes with practice. So it's not something that you're gonna get in one day, right? I mean, you can, right, and you could do that through memorization, but to get your concepts down, you have to get messy with the programming. So get your hands dirty with the compiler, try out some exercises, and see if your program works like instructed. So that's specifically with operators and control structures, right? You're controlling the program. You're making the program pursue a decision based on variables that it attained in the past of the algorithm. So it's if this variable is 5, then do this. If it's not 5, do this. You're giving the computer 2 lines of path to choose from. So it's very powerful. Arrays and array lists was simply just putting data into organizing data. Again, it shouldn't be that hard. I think what is annoying though is when you combine arrays and array lists with loops. And the only reason why this is kind of annoying is because you also have to account for how the fact that the way that you index arrays and array lists is not by starting the first position at 1. The first position is not referred to as 1, it's referred to as 0. So you start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you go, consecutively, numerically. So that's very interesting. So it comes with practice, but again, it isn't that it might be conceptually a little bit difficult, but when you actually get your hands dirty with it and then see the result on your compiler, then it makes so much more sense. And this just comes with time, right? You do it over and over again, and then you find out that, hey, I see a pattern, and then you pursue that pattern, and then you get the concept. So when you're combining that with loops, it might be a little bit tough, but with practice, it's actually relatively easy. Then I feel I believe methods, classes, and objects came. Now, methods, classes, and objects is, I think, probably the most important part of the AP Computer Science curriculum. And this is when you move from simply just typing programs into your compiler into making real objects, right? Because it's AP Computer Science A is not meant to be a Java programming class, right? There's a reason why ultimately there is a reason why they changed the language, right? I feel like I remember it used to be, it might have been C, right? Don't hold me on that, but they did change the programming language. However, the class itself is not a Java programming class, right? It's a computer science class, and a lot of people get that mixed up, right? They're like, hey, isn't programming the same thing as computer science? No, it's not. They're two completely different things, right? Programming can't exist without computer science, because computer science is programming. You would need computer science when you're making projects in programming. When you're making programming projects, you need computer science, but computer science doesn't need Java, right? For example, you can do, I believe in AP Computer Science Principles, actually, they don't even use an actual programming language. They use pseudocode, and that's basically just English at that point, right? It's just English in more abstract terms. And the reason why is because you're trying to get the concepts down, not necessarily the computer science concepts down, not the programming, right? Programming is supposed to not facilitate, it's supposed to supplement computer science. Computer science is not the same thing as programming. They're not equal to each other, right? Programming is used in computer science. So methods, classes, and objects was specifically a very important part, because that's when you get into the object-oriented programming aspect of AP Computer Science A, because it is ultimately an object-oriented programming course. You're making objects, you're making instantiation of classes, and you're going to be using static variables that sort of combine, or are consistent among all different instantiations of objects. If that doesn't make sense, I'm basically just saying that most projects are just making objects of their of real life things, and then putting it in programming terms so that we can execute something in regards to data, right? So in order to actually execute, in order to actually make an object, you need to learn what an object is in Java programming, and then you create a class, you learn about classes, you learn about methods, because in order to create an instantiation of a class, what is an instantiation of a class? An object. An object is an instantiation of a class. So, and then inside that class, there'll be a bunch of methods, and then in those methods, we have to realize what are the scope of the variables. Does this variable work in another method? Does this variable work in another part of the program? So this is when AP Computer Science A sort of takes a shift turn, because now instead of working with the same class, because everything that we did prior to that unit was done in the main method. You would only have one sort of page of code. All right, and that one page of code would have all your algorithms, it would have all your methods, it would have your one class with the main method, and then that method would, contact other methods and stuff like that. But then when you go into this unit, all of a sudden you have a new class, and that new class doesn't even have a main method. That new class doesn't even have methods that you want to use, right? Instead, you see a constructor, you see a get method, you see a set method, and it's very different. But then once you realize that this is actually what an object is in AP Computer Science, in just computer science in general, and then once you learn that, it becomes super powerful, and you can do a lot of projects once you learn this concept, because now you're envisioning stuff that in your real world as objects, and then once you see this object as a bigger, or as a part of something else, then you learn computer science, and then you can replicate it online. Think about it. When you're making let's say a board game, right? And one object would be maybe the tile that you move on, right? Another object would be the board itself. Another object would be the player and what he or she lands on. Those are all the objects, and then when you interact with all these objects, they create that interaction, they create that environment, and you can now replicate it digitally on your compiler with your Java programming language. Then there was a bunch of other classes that you need to learn about, such as the object class, the string class, wrapper class, and math class. These are relatively easy. These are sort of allowing you to manipulate stuff. So the string class can let you manipulate or get information about a certain type of text. The wrapper class allows you to manipulate the basic primitive types, such as integers, characters. I keep calling it char because you put char, char, on the program. And then the other primitive types that are not coming up in my head right now. And double. And basically, these classes are relatively easy, but the reason why that they don't cover this too much in AP Comp Sci is because you get this thing called a AP Computer Science A, I believe. I forgot what it's called, but you get some type of key at the end of the AP exam. Not a key at the end. You get this sort of how you take a standardized test and they give you sort of the units, 1 mile is equal to this many feet. This is 12 inches is equal to 1 foot, stuff like that, right? On the AP Comp Sci exam, they give you this, I want to say syllabus, but that's not I don't think that's the right word. I'll probably search it up later. But it basically, it takes the stress away of knowing what the actual programming terms are, right? Because it will give it to you, right? It will show you how the math class works. You just have to know how to work with it. This sort of reminds me of AP Stats, right? AP Statistics, they give you a formula sheet, right, with a bunch of formulas, and they even have the concept name and then what you put with every single variable such as the standard deviation, and they tell you that, they give you all that information, but that doesn't mean you can just get a 5 on the AP exam, right? Just because they give you the formulas doesn't mean that you know the exam. You have to know the concept behind it, right? And that's sort of the same application here, right? They give you the syntax for the math class, they give you the syntax for the string class, they give you the syntax for the wrapper class, but that doesn't mean you know it, right? So it's very basic, right? And once you cover it, right, you're able to utilize it in your program. Specifically with a math class, that helps with getting a random variable, because I mean, what is truly random with regards to, computer science? That's like a whole debate. Is something truly random? But you can sort of create like a random variable and pick out random things from your array utilizing the math class. So it's very powerful. Inheritance and polymorphism, again, is a computer science concept. This was one of the weirder ones, but it wasn't that like tested on the. I mean, it was tested on the AP exam, and it's pretty significant. But again, it's not like super hard. It's simply the names sound harder than the actual concepts. That's all you have to know about it. Recursion was simply a pre-cal concept. It was recursive data, basically. Basically, it would take in some input, process it, and if it wasn't within this constraint or it wasn't this type of variable or input, then it would go back with a new number, and then keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that until you get a number that fits the constraints. That's like, hey, I'm happy now. You can end the program. You can return this variable. And recursion was simply just, I feel like that is another aspect. Maybe, I don't think someone from pre-algebra would get this, a recursion problem, correct. However, it requires actually very, not intense, but it requires some basic mathematics, right, that you need to sort of cover. And computer science alone also has its own sort of PEMDAS, PEMDAS as in like the order of operations. It also has this sort of thing called like the order of precedence. So you also have to keep that in mind when doing recursive problems. So it's basic mathematics, basic computations, but you have to keep in mind of the order of precedence and making sure that your numbers are correct and are consistent throughout the program. And I believe the final thing that we covered the second last thing that we covered, I believe, was searching and sorting. So you got things like linear search, binary search, and then you see like, what is what's the most efficient, right? Sequential search, yeah, you can, find what you're looking for with a sequential search, but that doesn't mean that it'll be efficient, right? You're going through every single data to find what you're looking for, right? But with other searching methods that we see, right, they're much more efficient. Especially, I believe it's the I want to say binary, not binary. Might be the bubble sort, but anyway, you have to you basically have to visualize these concepts, and then you have to learn them in the actual Java programming terms. So you can learn searching and sorting. I believe in AP Computer Science Principles, they teach this without using programming, which is good because it shows how, like, the concepts actually look like with, like, maybe a deck of cards or something, right? But then with AP Computer Science, you have to know, like, the syntax of it. You have to be able to recognize it. Again, it's nothing too hard, right? You just have to know what every single searching and sorting method is. So it's like 5 little things. Last thing is exceptions. Again, this is nothing too hard, but these are like thrown in multiple choice questions, right? So maybe the computer doesn't work. Sorry, not computer. Maybe the algorithm doesn't work correctly, right? You have to learn when an exception is thrown out, right? Such as an arithmetic exception, null pointer exception, array index out of bounds exception. That's when it's out of bounds, right? You have maybe an array that's size 8, but you access the 9th or 10th data. It doesn't exist. So these are some exceptions you got to learn, right? And they're pretty significant because they come up on a lot of multiple choice questions as one of the multiple choice answers. Now, prior to the AP exam, I simply just looked over my notes. I had this big binder of all the classwork projects and basically handouts and notes that we covered, and it was a good Java programming. Basically, I had learned a lot about the Java programming language, but I learned more about the computer science concepts that were necessary, and that is what you need for the AP exam. So one big thing that I did before the AP exam was grind a bunch of FRQs. Now, what College Board does is that they have a bunch of FRQs on their website, and they have every AP FRQ that was released from like ever since they administered the exam. I want to say that, but I believe that many years ago they were using a different programming language, so it might be different there. But I think the last 5 years worth of FRQs, which isn't that bad because it simply takes like I don't know, it's not that long. I think it's an hour and a half maybe for the AP exam with regards to the FRQ. And my teacher printed it out, and then he would grade them based on the AP grading scale. And this really toned in my not only my Java skills, but it also toned in my computer science skills, right? At the end of the day, Java programming is not really looked upon as I mean, again, you have to use the Java programming language in the AP exam. However, like they're not gonna check for like syntax errors, right? They're trying to see if your computer science is on point. And I know if that sounds weird, but the algorithm is more important than the actual program. So like if I forget like a semicolon, they're not gonna care, right? They're not gonna take points off. They're not gonna say, hey, the program doesn't work, 0 points. What they're gonna do is they're just gonna ignore it, right? Because it doesn't matter. They're not testing Java, right? You need Java to tell the answer, right? Like how you need English to write an essay, like you need, numbers to finish a calc problem, right? But what is the point, right? There, you're trying to show that for the essay, you're showing that you understand maybe the rhetorical, the rhetoric. You're trying to show that you understand the rhetoric. Calculus, you're trying to show that you know the calc concept. Computer science, you're trying to show with the Java programming language that you understand computer science. And they give you a bunch of scenarios and stuff like that. So let's talk AP exam. AP exam was actually really good. I actually I liked that AP exam. I was mad scared actually because that was my second AP exam that I took. World history was my first exam, and yeah, I found that I had a lot of extra time at the end. Multiple choice was a bit of a grind simply because of my time constraint. Right, I was covering it, stuff like that. I think there were three questions that I had a little bit of an issue on. Right, I think they were one specifically was the numerical system one. I'm really kind of mad that I didn't cover it that much before the AP exam. So like, I knew it was an easy question, but like my mind wasn't just like clicking with it. So I was kind of mad about that, but all in all, it was a pretty nice test. It was kind of consistent with it was actually easier than the release questions that my computer science teacher actually gave prior to the exam. So we took like a mock exam, and then he would grade us and stuff like that. And that I was like, hey, this is probably the AP exam, right? And it was kind of tough actually. That release exam was pretty tough. So when I took the actual AP exam, when I found that it was kind of a breeze, I was kind of worried that the curve might not be that good. I mean, I think 20% people did get a 5, so it wasn't that bad. FRQs were honestly the easiest aspect of the test. What's cool is that you get a lot of room, right? So like if you run out of room to write your program, or like for me, I like sort of messed up the beginning of my program, so I needed like extra space. They give you a piece of computer paper, and you just staple in within your test booklet, and then you just submit that and write it out there. When did I take the exam? I want to say 2018. I want to say 2018. That was my exam. So if you want to go on College Board and see what I did, what AP exam that I took, that was the FRQ that I took. And it was very interesting. It was honestly, that's probably the only time, like, when you think of like AP tests, you think of like grind, you think of hard, you think of like some struggle. Honestly, with regards to the FRQ, not the multiple choice so much, but with the FRQ, I was just having fun with it. Right? I like programming, and it puts me like it relaxes me. So with doing it on the AP exam, right, and then seeing something that I actually understand, right, seeing a scenario that I can actually execute within my head in a matter of seconds, right, and then only to write it down on the paper, right, I was having fun with it, and I really did enjoy it when I was doing the AP exam. So that was really like good. And then my teacher blessed us with bagels, so he was very nice. That was very nice of him to get us bagels after the AP exams. Um, After the AP exam, we had like I think a month left of school, a month and a half left of school. I want to say I'm not trying to go with too much in detail, but what we did was that we were done. We were just chilling, and so what we did was we finished off well what we had missing on in our Java programming textbook, and that was GUI. And GUI is just graphic. I think it stands for graphic user interface. I don't hold me on that, but you're learning how to like create graphics in Java, right? Collect data and like so that you're not confined to the command line of the compiler, right? You want to get that user interaction with maybe a pop-up, and it's much more pleasant looking. You can put colors and stuff like that rather than being confined to that command line that really that again you're only supposed to use for that programming concepts and stuff like that. And then we had a final project. And I remember one group, they made a tic-tac-toe game. My group, we made a battleship game, right? If you don't know what battleship is, it's basically a board game where you try to take out your other person's battleships without looking at their board. Just search it up. You'll see. And I basically made that, and it was actually pretty fun to make, simply because, well, I used the object-oriented programming, the computer science concepts that I learned from the class. And it was hard. It wasn't okay. It wasn't hard. I understood what to actually do, but it took a long time, and I did it. Well, my group did encounter some issues, such as maybe the game wasn't ending too early. We had to play against the computer, right? It wasn't a two-person game; it was a one-person game. But they would be playing against the computer, and then the computer would randomly choose points on the our board and then try to take out our ships, whereas our one will be like, hey, we're more, we can pinpoint it. But we did ultimately finish the game, and it was pretty good. It was a good final project, and we presented it in front of the class. Teachers, again, let me just cover the teachers. It was a very good class. So we had two teachers. One person I actually knew from my middle school. She transferred here to my high school, and she taught me Algebra 1, Algebra 2. She taught me Algebra 1 in 7th grade, Algebra 2 in 8th grade, and then she was in my AP Comp Sci class in 10th grade. So I could say that I had her for 3 years. Right, and she was there again to get the class down, right? She was there when our district supervisor guy wasn't there. And the district supervisor who actually taught us the computer science, he was a chill dude. And then I later found out that so I do wrestling. So when I was in wrestling, I found out that my coach was actually taught by my computer science teacher, right, the district supervisor, when he was a kid at my high school. And on top of that, he was a wrestling coach back then. So what was interesting is that I was learning computer science from my coach's coach. Isn't that crazy? Interesting how the world goes like that. So I saw him at like our county tournaments. I saw him at some of our home games, or when we would compete with Saraville, because his children. He lives in Saraville, I believe. Because he's one of their board of directors, one of their board of directors. So, all in all, AP Computer Science was a very good class for me. It was the only class that I got both a 5 and an A plus on. And I credit that to a lot of things. I mean, one thing could be my programming knowledge from previous, but I feel like anyone that has the motivation to learn the Java programming language, and then the concepts that you learn in AP Comp Sci, I feel like anyone can sort of tackle this class and then get influence in potentially pursuing the computer science field, if that's a field, because a lot of people are interested in it, because it has, the average starting salary is relatively high. So a lot of people might get attracted to that, and then when they take AP Comp Sci A, they see and they get influence, and they see the potential, and they see the possible endeavors that they can pursue with computer science. And I'm all for that if they're all interested. And that's what I do at my Comp Sci Computer Science Club. I mean, you can be a programming teacher, right? But it's not the programming at the end of the day. It's not the language, right? Language is important. I'm not saying that it's not. But computer science can exist computer science is facilitated through programming. Programming is needed for computer science. But computer science itself, learning the concepts that, especially the concepts that I learned in this class, they don't necessarily, um, they're not programming concepts, they're comp sci concepts. Programming concepts are like, well, how do I write variable? How do I make a um, string, right? That is a programming concept. Whereas a science concept is like, how do I manipulate the variables? How do I make the computer make a decision? Right? That is required. You're not going to program without computer science knowledge, right? You can learn, programming, but you don't necessarily know the computer science concepts. So in the AP Computer Science A, you get both worlds. You get, not only do you learn a programming language that you potentially could pursue in college or put on your resume, because now that you have some expertise in Java, you can make projects such as the ones that you made in your class projects or exercises, and you also learn the basics of computer science, and that is a pretty valuable skill, whatever field you potentially will pursue, right? And that's just sort of my experience with AP Computer Science A. Thank you for listening.